baby, baby. It was all a dream. I used to read Word Up magazine. Salt and pepper and heavy D up in the limousine.
Hi, I'm Paul Warren.
And I'm Ryan Klein.
And this is another episode of SEO is Dead and Other Lies. Ryan, how are you doing today?
Happy Sunday. I'm feeling pretty good. I'm a little exhilarated. You went regular ball golfing. I went not so normal disc golfing this morning. So we're a little sunbeaten, a little tired, but we're really pumped up for this topic today.
You know, it's just a Sunday fun day all around, right?
You're
playing golf, you're playing frolf, whatever it is. We're talking SEO.
You're calling them frisbees. I don't think I've ever referred to it as a frisbee.
Yeah, you're playing frisbee, and
pretentious here in Charlotte, you know.
But we're going to talk about a pretty cool subject, I think, that really isn't talked about a lot in the SEO industry, and that is scraping. You know, like scraping websites for content, for data. There's a lot of stuff out there, and you know, most of it's done not really for like nefarious reasons. Like I think my first experience with anything scraping is like ScrapeBox. You know, that was like the original. I was like, whoa, yeah, you can do this. But we're gonna get into some of the reasons why you would do this, how you would do it, some tools that we use, and maybe even some ways that you can make your own like scraping tool.
I can't believe we haven't done this topic. I think that's going to be a great topic. I'm positive that we've referred to it and mentioned it on many other podcasts and kind of in passing, maybe even dove into a little bit, but dedicating the podcast to it, I think is the right way to go, because I feel like any really good, maybe leaning on the side of technical SEO does a lot of scraping.
I mean, I think it definitely can, depending on what space that you're in and like what your needs are, right? So we were kind of recently in a situation where we needed a lot of data about a particular type of business, just like so in the solar industry. And it was like, how do you get that, right? And so Ryan had a friend that made what did he make it out of, like in Python?
Yeah, so we're not going to be spitting out lines of code on this podcast by any means, but Python seems to be the scraper's best friend for these things, just because there are what are called libraries, which are pretty much packaged lines and chunks of code that'll pretty much give you a huge head start on creating your own operations and programs.
I like that you said library and not library, as my dad would call it, and I would be like, never ever say that again.
There should just be a thing called a library, but and it's something awful, like it's like just a grimy, especially grimy strip club, and you're like, oh, the library, oh, gross.
I was like, Dad, we're from the South. You can't make mistakes like that. People are going to judge us forever, right? We're already fighting an uphill battle being from Florida and like the South. So
I'm sorry to hear that.
But yeah, so let's dig into a little bit of, we'll just talk about maybe some of the mainstream tools first of all, sure. And then some of the uses and stuff that you would use this for on a regular everyday basis. And then we'll get into, if you're going to make your own, here's a couple like cool resources and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's also important to mention that at the end of the day, all these tools that SEOs are using are essentially scraping data and presenting it in different forms, or like, you know, audits. You know, when SEMrush runs a report, they're scraping the website and looking for data. So
yeah, so you shouldn't, you know, think of it as like, oh, this is an awful black hat thing to do. I mean, you can use scraping to do super like black hat. I hate that term now because I think it's like,
I know, I can't even believe you saying it, but
yeah, but like, you know, to do a lot of stuff like that. But you know, it's just a tool to get information. So, and like what you do with information is up to you.
So what are your purely scraping? You mentioned ScrapeBox.
That is like, I think most SEOs that have been in this industry for as long as we have, I think that's like your first experience with like a tool that does this, right? And it's a pretty janky tool. I don't think they've ever really updated it. But it was so, yeah, it was like, oh, you know, you can put all this information into it and like it'll go out and like scrape other websites, and you can get like content based on specific keywords or whatever. And you had to have like proxies, otherwise your IP address would it would like hit Google too many times and it would just ban it. You know, it was just like banging against the SERPs there. So a lot of the tools and stuff you have now, I like have like built-in proxies. You don't have to like worry about it. But I think that the first time I ever did anything, and then as I, my ability to do like SEO evolved and stuff, I had different tools. And I think SEO Content Machine was like the other thing that was pretty big for a little bit. And it just basically would find you like content, and then it would spin the content when it got back to you, so that would be like unique, right? So you could find it like based on certain keywords or whatever, and like whatever the word count was, the article, you could do like a lot of stuff with it, and then it would return you like this content.
This is starting to feel like another lifetime.
Yeah, like I haven't done any of this in forever.
I know but those are scrapers. I mean, the whole point of scraping data is because you can do a lot of these things manually, of course. I mean, they would just take forever. Like grabbing content from expired websites is something that I did just to learn about it 5 years ago. But once you get the hang of it, it's like you got to find a software. You got to develop a program that's going to be able to crawl these websites or URLs you give it and export it into a document. Yeah. You can't be doing this.
Technically, you can set up Screaming Frog to scrape the SERPs for you, not necessarily like websites, but you can set it up. So like I set it up in this really crazy way, which I don't remember how to do. I don't know if I could do it again. It would basically like fire like a yes or a no for like it would like search a term, and it would like search it through Google. And if the keyword had like a map pack result, it would fire that and like collect that data and like give it back to you, right? So that way, like there was a time when there was way less like local result map pack terms firing, and so you didn't know what was going to be in there or not. And so it was a really easy way to like just find like terms out there that like maybe you didn't rank for at all, right? So you just compile like all these different keywords from all these different competitors and across the industry, and it would fire it back and be like, oh, well, this isn't worth your time like spending on for like local SEO, right? But you could set the whole tool up to do that, which is pretty neat. But there's a lot of tools like that, right? So like I guess the concept of scraping is really like very broad when you think about it. Like it could be like a ton of different things. Like websites scrape each other all the time, right? Like the citation websites, when they're looking for new listings, they're like scraping each other to like build those listings.
Yeah, and right now, even to develop directories and be able to, especially industry-specific directories, you're going to have to scrape a lot of databases to come up with all the names and addresses and phones and URLs for a lot of businesses to propagate said directories. And
yeah, which kind of led me into this whole topic, right? Because we've had to pretty recently do this, and it was pretty neat. But we were scraping just Google, my business, or like Google Maps. We were scraping them,
right,
to get information on businesses in this particular niche,
which is apparently quite difficult because however Google My Business is set up from a crawling standpoint and allowing crawlers to actually like extract or extrapolate data from it changes a lot. So whatever code it has to be done, that's a little bit under the hood. What a programmer, a good programmer would be able to do. They're constantly updating their code for Google to allow them to do it to scale, because typically a lot of these kinds of crawlers, Google gets these requests and is like, all right, we see that you're automating this scraping, and they'll cut you off after 5 or 10. So it's hard.
Yeah. So you need to like either space out the time frame that it's doing it, or you got to get like proxies and stuff. So I guess like maybe a word of warning to anyone who's like trying to do this on their own for the first time, right? Like after we give you the resources to sort of look some of this stuff up, make sure if your IP address gets banned by Google and it's your house, that's like a difficult conversation with like your service provider that you need to get a new one.
Oh yeah, can you even imagine that? Yeah.
So like I don't know. I was working somewhere one time, and it was like a plugin for a tool that we had. I think it was Majestic. Like a Google extension for Majestic was like scraping like the SERPs, and our business IP address got blocked like for the entire company. Like, so we couldn't do any work for the rest of the day.
Everyone just points the finger, and then it's like the creepy SEO all the way in the back, right next to the IP
sorry. Yeah.
Oh, I was trying to get rankings.
I think it was actually like a paid search, like extension or something, like in like Chrome at the time.
I think, when it comes to these things, and I see it built into software, but it's definitely like built into, code that people execute in Python. They're always going to have like a random delay interval. They'll always delay it like a random 5 to 30 seconds. So it'll be like 12-second delay, then 17, then 30 seconds. And just because that's why whenever we do this crawling, you're not going to get like thousands of points of data in like an hour. normally lets it run for 8 or 10 hours. So
yeah, the time is your friend in this scenario. Like you're going to have to build sort of that stuff into it. And then I think we should talk a little bit about what you can actually scrape and get. And unless it's in like HTML, you're probably not going to be able to like get that information.
Yeah, that's true. At the end of the day, these crawlers are looking for data that's typically within like brackets of code to grab. So it's anything that's really in the source code that we're going to be talking about. But there's a lot. Everything is really unless the website is PHP or some sort of Ruby.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that's through Java script rendering that like you're not going to necessarily be able to get.
But that's why this is an SEO scraping conversation, because what you're looking for, your things look between the title brackets or description brackets or H brackets or links, like whatever is like in, hrefs it's like, okay, we're trying to pull links. You're going to be able to grab anything with like with the reference, like everything.
That is a great segue into like what I want to talk about now is like, what are some of the awesome things that you can scrape?
Oh, we're vibing. We don't do this, but yeah, we're bouncing back and forth. Yeah. So
so definitely like like anything content wise, right? Like keyword related, like you can set it up to find. So if you're looking for content topic ideas or anything like that, like you can pull this data. You can find domains that don't exist anymore. I don't know why we've never like built a scraper for DMOZ like back in the day.
I feel like there has been, but the thing is that trying to parse data via like the Wayback Machine breaks crawlers a lot.
Oh, that makes sense. Yeah. Because you also don't know like what you're going to get when you click on a link in like Wayback Machine.
Oh yeah, and then there's like a lot of spam, and there's a lot of they become foreign websites for a couple of years, and then they start pulling really weird crap. So I think that's one of the reasons.
You can find like specific metadata for things. You can find broken links, like you said. You can find link opportunities. Really, I've never really used it to like find a lot of like broken link building opportunities. I don't really spend a lot of time doing that, but you can conceivably build something that finds a lot of broken links across different websites. I mean, really, when you run something through like, was it Xenia, right? Xenia is like a crawler. It's not really a scraper, right? But like, it's like crawling a website and showing you back all that information. But you could set up a scraper to do this as well.
Yeah, the majority of the time, these things are going to be able to collect data and then put into a CSV and organize it however you like. It's not going to look super pretty, but it's going to be organized pretty easily.
All right, Ryan. So if you wanted to make one of these, you don't know anything about it, where would you go to learn?
Are you talking about like kind of from scratch? Like if you're out there and you're trying to crawl some things, but you're not seeing software, you're not seeing a solution that does exactly what you're looking for?
Yeah, you're like, I learned a little bit about it. I started listening to this podcast. I want to build it, but I don't know how to do anything. So step one, where would you go?
I mean, for me, I was able to successfully create some scrapers using Python. I know that we've talked about it. I'm not sure if that's a segue that you were looking for.
Yeah, so rudimentary knowledge of Python. So learn a little bit about it. And Python's really simple. Doesn't it require a ton of time to become?
It's still a pretty high learning curve, object-oriented programming language. It's still like on par with learning like a C++ or a Java. It does have methods and it does have objects and it does have classes. So there is a learning curve, but I think it's well worth it once you even have to create an environment on your computer to even run it. There is a learning curve, but I think that if you're a little bit more technically savvy and you want to do some unique things with scraping and gathering data, it's worth it. You'll put some time into it. But like I said before, there are libraries, which means that there are packages that have a lot of code already written in advance that will enable scraping operations. That'll like save you 95% of the time from having to write it yourself. Like you're not going to have to create everything from scratch. So which is fortunate. You might be able to, I know this is like probably the most technical stuff we've talked about in a while, but you might be able to write languages where you input an URL and you're going to be able to extract and export all the H1s in a page with like 15 lines of code or even like 10 lines of code. It's really not that crazy. Plus it's it's an adventure. We're all trying to better ourselves and learn new things.
Yeah, but also learn skill sets that make your life way, way easier. And then make things more valuable. Yeah. So I guess really just like, pick the language that makes sense and then like kind of learn a little bit how to build it. And there's tons of resources around all of that. There's also a ton of like YouTube videos if you want to just like follow along with someone that's like doing it. And I would suggest doing that. There's a lot of like freemium. I would say mostly like paid plans, like not really you can get anything with like the free plans, like tools out there that are like a little more user friendly, like Octoparse. It's like a really popular one. Have you heard of that?
No. Octoparse, is it parsing 8 things at once?
I mean, it's just like a web scraping tool that made easy for like human beings. So like coders and non-coders alike, basically.
So like don't even bother using Python. I mean, I guarantee at this point, there between GitHub and forums, people will have so many snippets of code. You'll plug it in and you'll be able to just do it. You won't have to do that much yourself.
That's absolutely true. Like someone's already built this and they're going to share it out there, like 100%. I guess just don't be afraid to like mess it up. Do be afraid about getting your IP address blocked from Google.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid about like making code that doesn't execute.
All it does is just freeze your computer and then you can't use it and you just have to reset your computer.
Yeah, everyone does that. And everyone has that computer where you're just holding down the power button for 12 seconds anyways. So.
But I will say, I mean, the fruits of labor of like the Python, if you don't see what you're looking for out there, is like we were going back to what we mentioned with Google My Business. But for the scraping, we're talking about getting data and using it for your own benefit or for research. Sometimes we use it for lead gen or building out directories. And my buddy is a programmer, a developer, used Python and was able, by using a keyword such as solar companies within Google My Business, I think he did scrape about 3,000 or 4,000 businesses and exported CSV organized by the name, location, phone, URL. There's a crazy amount of like structured data out there that you can like. That's really helpful. That's really helpful stuff. What, the structured data? Oh yeah. I mean, it really is helpful when you think about like from a competitive standpoint. Like you can look at just everything that like you're like a giant portion of competitors are doing and like analyze that data like very quickly, right? So like in like the microdata, if people are using a specific schema and you're not, like you can like fire, like you can scrape what they're using and then like you could return a result of like yes or no, basically, in like an Excel doc and like see really quickly like how many people have this and like how many people don't. And you'd be like, oh, I need this then. The possibilities are really endless. Even I was thinking about right now, because here and there we talk about it when maybe dabble in the legal world and mass torts and whatnot. You can see what's up and coming by following 100, 150 websites that represent clients for mass torts and pharmaceutical and product liability, and you can see like these 150 have these 150 of the same, but then only these 10 have like this new one, and you can kind of keep an eye on what's trending based off of the stuff. Oh yeah, man. So it's really like endless when you think about like all the ways that you could use this. I'm surprised. Maybe we should just build like a really baller like web scraper. Well, some web scrapers are good, but the user interface is always pure trash. They're never good. They're like impossible to like look at. And I would say most SEO tools, most like really effective ones, have terrible user interfaces. I mean, like you got your SEMrush and whatever, like the really mainstream ones, but like there's a whole world out there of like additional like SEO tools that like do one thing like really well, but it's like the worst user experience like ever. Like before Google made it so you couldn't do do a Google My Business post like at scale. You had to do it like each individual like. Oh yeah, what was that all about? Well, they updated it to allow you to do this like across the board during like COVID. So if you wanted to be like, hey, here's our code out. Oh, they're like, we were making your life hard before, but because of COVID, let's make your life easier. Yeah. And so I had this like really ghetto tool that I got that was like, it was, it wasn't their best work, but it got the job done, That's good. I think that it's worth noting that what we're talking about today isn't automating. Like we're not talking about automating not at all, or like automating your link building or automating posting. Like the scraping is a process that's technically autonomous and you're not proactively doing it, but the purpose is not even close. It's not execution. It's
You're gonna have to manually run these scrapes. Like you don't have to sit at your computer when it's happening, because it's gonna be like 8, 9, 10 hours worth of like doing this. But it's not like, and then you have to do something with the data, which is gonna be generally a lot of data that comes back to you. So you have to kind of know what to do with that too.
Well, that's a good point, because getting tools that are going to help automate your SEO are going to have finite amount of operations. You're only going to do like X amount of iterations of something that you're trying to accomplish. But like scraping data, I mean, if you don't set like parameters or like a goal, that those things will like go nuts.
They're a machine, they're like the Terminator. They're just going to keep going and going and going.
Yeah. So from like a lead gen standpoint, I know we're talking about, gathering data and organizing it and being able to accomplish different things with it. We've used it for, I have, but probably you too, just to, giving it a list. And I know it is automated, but it is scraping websites, like looking for certain things. And I've had scrapers that were like returning like website codes. So, basically finding out if the website was live or not, or if there were broken pages on the website. That one's pretty common.
Some good advice for pitfalls. I'm trying to think, is there anything else that you came across that like screwed something up when you were doing this?
Just doing repeated searches and like over and over and over again from like the automated sources. Like
sometimes you just do that yourself, just normal Googling, you get that like CAPTCHA,
Yeah, I was doing something recently where I was getting the CAPTCHA just for myself. And I know why. Whenever you go like beyond the recommended amount of searches, so you do like a search and it's like you get to page 12. Once you start going past that, then Google starts giving you the CAPTCHA, because it's like, all right, well, this isn't really pertinent information, so you're probably a crawler. That's when that kind of happens. But I think, the timing intervals and then the proxy is where it's at. Do you know if you have to like cycle between multiple proxies, or is it just like one proxy?
I haven't had to. I think the idea is like they have multiple proxies that they cycle through. So whenever I run anything that like is going to have that issue with Google, I have like 10, and it does like a certain amount on one, and then it moves to the next one, and moves to the next one, or whatever. And so that way, like it never really gets busted. So you'd have more than one. Just like you couldn't do them all from your own like IP, right? So it's like there's a percentage that you're going to have to pass them out.
Well, yeah, one thing that we're going to work on right after this, and I don't know if we're not going to say what industry it is, but yeah, crawlers, you get all the data and it's all in a CSV, and you upload it to WP all import. You can essentially create a directory with the proper information for the business and create a directory in less than an hour. Isn't that fun?
Yeah, that sounds like a lot of fun. I can't wait to tackle that.
Those are the steps that basically are like, oh, so that's what like could happen when you have a crawler, not to mention find huge opportunities for content or keywords or on-site optimization or trends and competition and industries. They're essential.
I think you'll find that the further you get into SEO, like I saw something the other day and it was like the levels of SEO, and like the final level was like being able to do it at scale, right?
Right. Yeah.
It's always like the most complicated thing. It's like, how do you do stuff at scale? Like, how do you do it for 100 websites at the same time? There's, just 5.
One thing I was going to say too, we didn't really mention, is we were talking about like do it yourself, which is probably the route most people won't want to take, which is fine. And then there's software that, one piece of software might cover this, but the other one doesn't cover this, that kind of thing. So you can always just find freelancers or like VAs, or if you can only do it manually, don't do it manually yourself. Go to like the Philippines and get someone to do it for like a couple bucks an hour. But then you can always find developers that'll just be like, hey, can you scrape 5 or 10,000 websites? And they'll figure out how to do it on their own. And they'll just be like, yeah, it'll be $25.
There's a ton of services offered for this, right? You can go on Legit or Upwork and find someone that can just build this for you like really quickly. There's probably just standalone websites, people offering the service. So
yeah, people can either build it for you, and God knows what kind of format. You know what they'll do a lot of times is they might even write it in PHP, honestly. So you can use it on web-based. So then you can go onto like a page, and then you can, because at the end of the day, PHP is similar to Python. They're both object-oriented programming.
I think we discussed I don't know how detailed this really was for people. It's hard to get kind of detailed in like technical things like that on a podcast.
It's not like we were going to sit here and say like, also in Python, go search for this library and then install it and then use code like this. It's just kind of to plant the seed to know that this is what's out there, and it's not your job to do everything manually the rest of your life, because you got better things to do.
if you want to learn, you really kind of have to learn Python or just something if you want to build it yourself. So I guess the key takeaway is if you want to build it yourself, watch some good like YouTube videos on how to build this particular thing. Like you can just go how to scraper with Python on YouTube.
Yeah, just type in like Python scraping. Yeah,
Python scraping. Python scraping. And then you can find tons of sources that can build this for you. But the key, right, is to really know what you want to get out of like the tool that you're either making or you're trying to find, like the specific things that you're trying to like scrape for. And that's going to help you out a lot. And then just be careful with your proxies, careful with your IP address, because once it's banned, it's real hard to get another one to paint. Well, it's not that hard, but you got to call like Bright House or something.
I'm just like on realpython.com, and people are scraping job boards where it's like, oh, interesting. Yeah, job boards. So you can aggregate data.
Oh, that is interesting. You create your own job board if you wanted to.
Crawling everything within like a certain divs. Yeah, it's endless. It's one of those things that just opens up a new way of looking at how to do your job and SEO more efficiently.
Yeah, it's like so endless. It's hard to talk about a specific, just depending on what you need it to do. It's super useful, but there's a million things you can do. Anyways, well, thanks everyone so much for listening. We really appreciate it. We've gotten back to regularly podcasting, Ryan. This is like 2 in a month.
You say so.
Yeah, but we really appreciate all of our listeners. Be sure to like, share, or subscribe anywhere that you listen to our podcast at. And then if you're interested in being on the show, you can hit us up at seosaidandotherwise@gmail.com, or you can leave us a message on our YouTube channel. We usually respond pretty quickly on either one of those. So.
Sounds good. We'll look for the next one.
I'm Paul Warren.
And I'm Ryan Klein.
And this is another episode of SEO's Dead and Other Lies.
Goodbye.
Bye. Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye. Okay.
Goodbye.
Bye.
Okay. Goodbye.
Bye. Okay.